practices on their land. We also do tax ditch maintenance at the request of tax ditch managers. So that's really what keeps that aspect of our operation going. Next slide. Just to highlight one of our bigger cost share programs, and some of you may have seen these over the years, our conservation cost share, which is primarily our cover crop program. That's the crops that you see on the fields over the winter months that are being destroyed this time of year in anticipation of the spring planting. Move to the next slide. What our cover crop program does is it scavenges those excess nutrients, really absorbs those so they're not lost with seepage into the ground and eventually making their way into our water supply. Those cover crops over the winter will hold those nutrients in place and make them available for the spring crop as it's planted. What I wanted to show you here was just a little history over the last really 15 or so years and the trend line that's going up. These are the amount of acres that are planted in cover crops throughout the county. You can see we, 2007, 2008, we were hovering around that 30,000 mark. Now we're routinely hitting that 80,000 mark for the last couple of years. So a lot of work being done by our landowners and ag producers in the area on that. Next slide. So like I said, 83,000 acres, that nets out to about a $7.4 million annual program. It's important to point out some of the folks who contribute to this. County Council does make a contribution along with DNREC and DDA, and those are with bond bill funds that they receive from the General Assembly. And then the Conservation District works to receive other funding primarily through the Chesapeake Bay program or EPA's non-point source program that's administered through DNREC. Also to note the landowner contribution that goes into that of just over $2.6 million on an annual basis. So landowners have a lot of skin in this program as well. Cover crops have been determined to be one of the most effective and efficient water quality practices for agricultural producers. So we're happy to see that trend line as far as participation continues to increase. The next slide. Like I said, we also get involved with traditional conservation best management practices. This is really where we focus on water quality, habitat preservation, dealing with erosion issues, soil health issues. These are awards that are made directly by the Conservation District's Board of Supervisors, so our governing body. They also include design and permitting costs in addition to the construction cost. And this is the nice aspect of it is that we're able to leverage those local dollars to attract different federal and state sources of funding that just further those dollars coming into the county. And, that's something that we're very proud of being able to extend both state and county and local dollars and attracting other dollars coming in. So next slide. Something new that was just started is our Inland Bays Aquaculture Cost Share Program. Think of this similar to our cover crop program. We recognize the fact that oysters have a direct impact on water quality in our inland bays, and the Conservation District utilizes some of the funding that we received to start a cost share program for the oyster farmers. It really turns out right now to be a little bit of a subsidy for the oyster farmers, but we're also trying to encourage more participation as well as more growers to take on larger plots out in the inland bays. If you can go ahead to the next slide. What we do is pay a nickel for every harvested oyster that is based on the reports that the oyster farmers are already providing to DNREC on a monthly or quarterly basis. And we have 5 of the 7 active leaseholders participating right now. It's anticipated that we will hopefully see that grow over the coming years as hopefully more and more folks get involved in that. But you can see it's not a real big investment right now, just a little over $7,500 in the the first 6 months of the programs have been active, but we certainly hope that that's something that we see continue to grow in the coming years. Next slide. Tax ditches, I think this is a question that routinely comes up here in Delaware, but especially in Sussex County. Next slide. Throughout the county, there's 137 organizations. Actually, that has increased just slightly now to just over 140. Roughly 1,200 miles of tax ditch through the county. These ditches were originally designed for agricultural drainage. Really to open up farmland that wasn't able to be productive because it had no way to drain. So back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, when a lot of these were installed, it opened up production for agricultural production. What's happening now as the county is changing and that farmland, as you all see on a regular basis, is often turning into development, whether it's residential or commercial. These tax ditches are now being used as stormwater outfalls as well. So they've really expanded their operation, or the intent of their original operation, from strictly agricultural to also taking on new development as well. In many towns around the area, these tax ditches have also served as an outlet for the drainage from the town's storm drain system. So not the case in every community, but there is that taking place. And here in Lewes, the Highland Acres tax ditch is in existence and operational. Challenging for the both the operation and the maintenance on that, just because of the development that's taken place around it. But that is an active tax ditch here right in the city of Lewes. Next slide. The Conservation District also provides funding assistance through our tax ditch cost share, which helps to go towards maintenance as well as improvements to the tax ditch system or repairs that are needed. You can see in 2023, we paid out about $329,000 in cost share dollars, with the tax ditches themselves putting up $426,000. The county does contribute a little bit to that, in the tune of about $125,000 a year. And so for every dollar that they put up there, it's matched by roughly $5.61. So it's a small program given the needs that are out there. And as you remember, with 1,200 miles of ditching throughout the county, that $800,000 doesn't go very far. Fortunately, the volunteer managers on each one of these ditches, are usually pretty frugal, but it's important to remember that these tax ditches, especially in this area and with the year that we've had with all the rainfall, it's critical infrastructure out there, and it needs to be treated as such, and people need to be reminded of that fact. So, next slide. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica Watson. Like I said, Jessica is our sediment and stormwater program manager, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me okay? I guess we'll go ahead and go to the next slide already. So as Dave said, my name is Jessica Watson. I'm the program manager with the sediment and stormwater program. And I've been with the district for over 20 years. It's been a flash. It's gone by. But the great thing about our office is I get to work with really great people who are very experienced in this field. And I learn something new all the time. But basically, the basis of the regulations in Delaware, you are never very far from water when land is developed. And that's always our concern. Is that we're protecting these areas with proper control, as well as projects under construction, and then also for stormwater management. Next slide, please. So the Delaware DENREC established the regulations in 1991, and that means that anything that disturbs 5,000 square feet, which is not very big, 50 by 100, is required to have some type of permit for earth disturbance activity. So whether that's building a single family house, building a Walmart, building a residential subdivision, there is some type of permitting that's involved that addresses both sediment erosion control, so your black silt fence and stone construction entrance and other various controls in place, but also addresses stormwater management, basically the land use change in the watershed, and making sure that that doesn't have negative impacts on our water bodies. And that we're addressing quantity and quality treatment with those stormwater facilities. The program is delegated to different agencies throughout the state and Sussex County. It is solely the Sussex Conservation District, meaning we have responsibility for everything, any earth disturbance activity in Sussex County, including the municipalities. It's a little bit different in Newcastle. Both Kent and Sussex are similar in that we oversee everything in our counties. Next slide, please. So our delegation responsibility, so GenRec oversees our program. As Dave explained, we are not GenRec employees. We work for the Conservation District, but the regulations have been delegated to our office. And so we review plans for sediment and erosion control and stormwater management. We inspect those projects until it's fully constructed. So if it's a subdivision, we are involved in that community until every house is constructed. And sometimes that can be 2 years we're at build out, and sometimes that can be 15 years, depending on how long it takes for that development to be fully constructed. But our involvement in that community is until everything is completed, meaning every single family house. We review those plans for compliance with the regulations. And so when we review plans, we are looking at, as I said earlier, the land use change and the watershed. So going from whether it was a farm field to an impervious area with parking lot, roof runoff, the stormwater is intended to mitigate that land use change in the watershed. So there's different types of stormwater facilities, and I'll touch on those. But those stormwater facilities are providing quality treatment. So there's a certain amount of extended detention time that or infiltration that's occurring in those stormwater facilities before it discharges or infiltrates into the ground. But then we're also looking at location in a watershed. So in some projects may have tidal discharges, some depending on the timing in the watershed may be released earlier if there's a watershed analysis. And most projects are doing what we call peak management, management of the 2, 10, and 100-year storm events. So the 100-year storm in Sussex County, and it changes for each county. In Sussex County, it is 9.2 inches in 24 hours. That is our design storm that's used. And so many projects, they are designed to manage up to that 100-year design storm. And what that means is from pre to post, when it was a farm field or woods, they're managing that water to the same rates as when it's developed. So the stormwater is basically mitigating that land use change in the watershed. And you'll see different outlet structures, and I'll touch on this as we get into the presentation, but those structures are intended to meter out the flows to this pre-development rate so that we do not have flooding downstream, and that's the intent. So we have a review team, and I'll introduce them in the presentation. As I said earlier, we inspect the project until it's fully constructed. We also do maintenance inspection. So we are the technical resource for perpetuity. So every project that makes it to final closeout, which I'll be honest, is it takes a long time, to get all of the punch list items addressed. And once we cross that finish line and it's turned over to an HOA, we are still the resource. So that community reaches out to us. We provide maintenance inspection of the stormwater facilities, any questions pertaining to flooding, drainage, any kind of sinkhole that's formed, any kind of issue, we are the resource, and we come out at no charge or anything like that. We come out and we provide technical assistance. We also do outreach and education. And as I said, we're technical assistants. So on our team, our review team, so we have John Justice, Donna Colton, and Michael White. So we review all sediment and stormwater plans. As I said earlier, they come through in different formats. We have residential permitting, we have standard plans, and we have detailed plans. And the detailed plans are your large subdivision plans that require stormwater management. And that's really, our team spends a lot of time meeting with engineers, going over the compliance for those projects. It takes a long time for a project to go through, from start to finish, because there's comments back and forth. As our team reviews those projects for compliance, they generate comments, they send that to the engineer addresses them, and they resubmit the project, and then it goes through again. Most of the time, reviews can be, 3 to 4 times that it goes back and forth, depending on the complexity of a project. Next slide, please. So our field team, so we have Mark Walter, John Barwick, Craig Mills, and Buddy Griffith. These gentlemen here have years of experience, and we are very lucky to have them on our team. They are a great resource to our office. Craig Mills is your inspector that covers the Lewes area, and is my right hand, so I don't know what I'd do without him, but he does a phenomenal job. And then Buddy Griffith is our maintenance inspector, so he comes out and provides technical assistance to any HOAs that need any kind of help. Next slide. And our admin team, so we have Liam Thompson. He is wearing multiple hats at the district these days. He in his college days was an intern for our office and cataloged all of our plans from 1991 to present. So he keeps all of our records. So FOIA requests come through him, but Liam recently came drone certified. And so he's flying a lot of our projects for us just so that we can stay on top of everything because projects have gotten quite large. It takes a lot of time to walk all of them, and really having that, aerial view is extremely helpful. So he is also doing that for us and running a turbidity meter, testing water for us to see turbidity levels. So he's wearing multiple hats at the district. And Jennifer Grice has been with our office the longest, and Faith has just joined our team. So as plan review, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but it is a complex process, and there's steps that a project has to go through in order to get approval. So the first step is a pre-application meeting. Basically, the conceptual project is submitted, and we discuss any kind of drainage challenges, whether it goes to a tax ditch, whether there's wetlands, any challenges that we know of with that project get discussed. And that's really kind of, we figure out what type of stormwater, they can have for that particular project. Do we have a high water table? Is it going to be a wet pond? So these are all things that we talk about. We talk about where the project discharges, if there's problems currently downstream, if we know of any historical drainage or flooding problems, all of that gets discussed at these meetings. And then that's the first meeting. And then after the pre-application meeting and the engineer has time to work on the project, formalize his project, he submits it to our office where there's a 30 calendar day. When it comes into our office, it's logged in. We have 30 days to do the review. And then our staff picks up the plan and goes through, and it's a detailed process. It takes a lot of time to go through each project. And they're looking at different things, sediment erosion control, like the different controls for when a project's under construction. And then we're looking at the permanent stormwater and how that project is providing quantity and quality treatment so that we don't have downstream impacts. Next slide, please. So our inspection team, and I touched on this a little bit, when a project actually gets across the finish line and is approved, and the project can proceed with construction, we have the first step. Well, there's multiple steps. I mean, there's bonding procedures and all kinds of things, but when they can actually have the pre-construction meeting, all the administrative tasks are out of the way. We have an on-site pre-construction meeting where our inspector meets with the contractor and the developer, and they go over that plan, the sequence of construction, what is to happen first, which is all of your perimeter controls, your black silt fence, the stone construction entrance. We go over how the stormwater is going to be constructed, all of that. And then once that project gets started, we are there on a routine basis, depending on, the stage of construction. It could be daily, it could be weekly, it could be bi-weekly, depending on, what stage of construction that they're at. So if it's a critical point, then we're going to be there every day until we finish that installation. So we, and then, as I said earlier, our inspectors are out there until the project's fully completed. So, which could be anywhere from a couple years to, over a decade plus, just depending on how quickly that project builds out. So, and then our inspectors are also very busy with construction and drainage complaints and dust complaints and everything that's associated with any of these active construction projects. So it's a challenging, ever-changing day-to-day activity. So maintenance inspection. So we have thousands of stormwater facilities that have been constructed since 1991. So I don't have a total count of how many, but we go out and as requested, we'll provide maintenance inspection. We typically go out maybe every 18 months to 2 years. We try to hit every project, but we have some communities that call us every year and say, hey, we would like Buddy to come out and meet with our HOA and walk the stormwater facilities. And that's a service that we provide. They just want an assessment, to make sure everything's functioning correctly. And that's a service that we provide to anybody who requests. So there's many different types of stormwater facilities. Wet ponds is typically what you see everywhere with the fountains, and most people understand that, but there's also dry ponds and infiltration ponds. There's bioswales, bioretention. There's even underground stormwater management systems underneath parking lots. And those really depend on what type of soils are underground, whether or not that they can be utilized for infiltration. Next slide. So wet ponds, which is really the most common that we see. And Lewes, you're fortunate here because you do have really good sandy soil. So we do have a couple infiltration facilities around. It really just depends where you are in Lewes. But wet ponds are designed, as I said earlier, to provide quantity and quality treatment, depending on that project's location in the watershed, on how they were required to comply with state regulations. A lot of people like the wet ponds just because of aesthetics, with the buffers, the fountains, and it seems to be a selling feature that a lot of developers use. Next slide, please. So how a stormwater pond functions, typically that water is going to come in via either a closed storm drain or an open swale system. It flows in, and then sediment settles out of the pond, typically in a forebay, the initial inflow point where sediment can drop out. And then clean water is going out what we call the low flow orifice, which is the small hole on the concrete structure there. And if you recall earlier, I was talking about the structure's meter outflows, what we call a pre-development rate. So those orifice size, each project will be, engineered, and those orifice sizes will change, but they're intended to meter out those flows, what we call pre-development rates, so we do not increase the flooding downstream. And then the stormwater facilities are discharging to the same location as where the water flowed in pre-development. So maintenance, this is some of the guidance that we provide when we work with communities. The big thing for us is always, watching the ponds, making sure you understand how they function, what type of system that you have. If anything looks abnormal, reach out to our office, looking at it before a storm event and then after a storm event to make sure that the water went down. So the low flow orifices on the structure, the water should always be either at that low flow orifice or below. And then we know that we have the storage volume in that facility. So it's not the water that's in the pond that's providing management, it's everything above. So that we have the storage above that low flow orifice and then it draws back down. So we always tell people, when we have these storm events, turn the pond fills off, watch your pond, make sure that, the outlet is not blocked, that everything can flow through. Because we're going to need it for a significant storm event. Buffers. So the other big thing that we get contacted about quite frequently are buffers. Buffers are extremely important to filtering, reducing any kind of nutrients that go into the stormwater facilities. It's not something that we regulate, but it is strongly encouraged for the overall health and longevity of a pond. And something that we're very passionate about that can be enhanced with flowers. But our soils in Sussex County are highly erodible. They're very sandy in nature. And if you mow that pond to the water's edge and you have a fountain, you will have erosion and you will have to dredge that pond. If you maintain the buffers, you are extending the life. So this is what we consider a best management practice and is strongly encouraged. So buffer benefits. Obviously, any kind of wildlife, pollinators, these are things that we're strongly encouraging. You have some beautiful stormwater facilities in Lewes, some that are even featured on the walls in our office that have, beautiful buffers, all kinds of flowering vegetation, extremely healthy ponds. Next slide. So I just like to wrap up with a couple pictures of successful maintenance. This is one facility in, that's Breakwater in Lewes. Next picture. Pilot Town, here's another one. Community is very active in maintaining their stormwater facility and creating wildlife habitat buffers. They do a great job. This also discharges to a tax ditch. They do a great job with a giant forebay as a pre-treatment and then overflows to the rest of the pond. Next picture, please. Here's another picture, just buffers throughout the season. This is the buffer in the wintertime. Things that communities, HOA should be doing to extend the life of their facilities. Another one, just enhanced buffers around the facility. Next one, please. Yep. And most of these companies are all working with a pond maintenance company on the proper management. So treating with any kind of chemicals as needed and treating invasive vegetation, critters, all of that kind of stuff, erosion. Yep. And then so resources from our office. Next slide, please. So on our website, there's tons of resources. We do seminars, education workshops. Every year we have a series in the fall on different topics. The webinars or everything is on our website where you can go back and rewatch any of these videos, tons of presentations from different experts over the years. We continue to evolve and try to address any concerns that the public has. But we have lots of resources for HOAs. All the different videos on our website. We partnered with Center for the Inland Bays, University of Delaware. So we continue to expand on that, and it's all on our website. Yep. Different fact sheets. And we have newsletters that come out. Conservation signage that talks about the importance of buffers. And that's it. If anybody has any questions.
Before we go over some at the table, you have questions?
Yes. Well, someone else want to go first? I don't need to be first with the questions. All right.
I'll go first. Sorry about that. Hey, thank you for your presentation. Just a quick question regarding the closed cases you mentioned, and then there's follow-up, it sounds like, after the fact. Are those typically HOAs and others requesting you to come out and kind of help with some of their water quality issues, or do you also function kind of are you coming based on complaints from residents, or is it both?
It's probably both. So depending on, we have a maintenance inspector, and if he's addressing complaints or other, technical questions, he's trying to hit all of these projects, but I would say most of them are being requested. I mean, we have very active HOAs throughout the county who contact our office pretty frequently as a resource. And so they'll say, hey, can you have Buddy come out? It's been a year. Or they'll explain a problem to us and we'll quickly just have him go out and take a look at it. So it really depends on the situation. But it's both.
And how about random audits? Are there any that you just
Oh,
check
yeah.
at?
Yep. I mean, absolutely. So he on his schedule may just say, hey, today is this particular project. So, it can be depending on what his workload is like and how many complaints. If things are kind of slow, then he's just going through and doing, those projects. And usually he'll hit different areas. So he'll try to hit all of Milton, all of Lewes. So collectively, all of those projects in an area.
So one quick question probably for me. You set up early in front that Kent and Sussex were similar.
Mhm.
Newcastle was different. What are the high points of or benefits, detriments of what Newcastle does?
Newcastle is very different. So,
Recognize it's an urban.
right. And so the delegation responsibility is divided up. So you'll have Wilmington, Middletown, Newark. So it's divided up. Newcastle County, Newcastle Conservation District. So there's different roles. I don't know the pros and cons. I know for Kent and Sussex, I mean, for me, the great thing is I feel like everybody is accessible. Reaching the different towns, we have great working relationship with all the different municipalities, all the other state agencies, because we're involved in all of these projects and we're working with the same people over and over. There's different codes that are involved in up north. So I think that also plays a role, like with Newcastle County, with the review.
I'll let Tim speak, but Jessica, I want to thank you once again. You are always extremely informative and professional and get the points across. So thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you also for your presentation and attending this meeting. I do have several questions for you. One of the questions is, with respect to the ditches that are parallel to state roads, do they fall under your oversight or control?
No, I mean, so anything that is a state road, and I shouldn't say this is not in every situation, because you'll have some state roads in a neighborhood. But let's just say like Route 9, that's going to be DelDOT's road right of way. So
And they're responsible for maintaining that. Is that correct?
I believe so, that it's their responsibility. And then in developments that have state roads, because most of our subdivisions in Sussex County are privately maintained, but some developments do have DelDOT roads. And in those communities, DelDOT has pavement to pavement, meaning you have to get an entrance permit from their office to put a driveway in, but they're not mowing that swale. They're not, grading or anything like that, but state roads, they do have, my understanding is they have maintenance yards that are dedicated to the mowing and maintaining of those areas.
I see. I'd like to talk to you about the adaptation of tax ditches from an agricultural use application to residential development.
Mhm.
At the time that a parcel that that has tax ditches on it, and it's been used successfully for agricultural purposes, at the time that that property becomes subject to development, what is the evaluation of, can you describe the evaluation that's done of that existing tax ditch? And what is required of the developer to make sure that that tax ditch is brought up to standards to meet the needs of a residential subdivision, or it could be commercial, but nonetheless, a different use of land. It's a
Right.
different land use, and making sure that that infrastructure is cleaned, graded correctly, et cetera, to achieve the desired results.
Yep. So when a project is discharging to a tax ditch, DENREC drainage section, who has authority over the tax ditches, they are involved from day one. So our pre-application meeting, which is the initial conversation, that conceptual meeting of, hey, I'm proposing a subdivision in this location. What do you think? They participate in that meeting. So their office is engaged immediately because they're going to have key information that we do not have. I mean, we do have knowledge of where we have different drainage problems and challenges, but they're going to know the maintenance history, who the tax ditch manager is, when the last time it was dipped out. They're going to have information that's important to that, for us approving that project. So that plan is also submitted not only to our office, but the plan is also submitted to DENREC drainage section. And we do not approve the sediment and stormwater plan for that project until we receive an approval letter from DENREC drainage section, because we don't know if that developer needs to do a ditch tip out, whether they need to change a pipe crossing. There's going to be certain things that office is going to look for because of that change of going from agriculture to a development. But then, for us, we're also making sure that project is discharging the flows from that project to a pre-development rate, what is acceptable in the watershed.
One of the concerns that I have, and I'm not an engineer, so I'm not well informed, but one of my concerns about the practice that is used for design of stormwater management assets, I'll call them, is if what you're studying is a site plan and not the surrounding area. In fact, in other words, how that particular parcel might drain towards and onto other parcels, surrounding parcels. And I know the idea here is that, and I think this might be even a state law, a state code, where stormwater that originates on a site has to stay on that site. It can't move off that site. Is that correct?
No, so the way it works is properties have a discharge, what we call an analysis point, where the water leaves. So, and in some cases it doesn't, depending on the storm event. Some properties are a bowl, and they collect that water and the water sits there. And those are challenging projects for an engineer to design because there is no discharge. But most projects have a discharge, meaning when it rains, there's a slope on that property, even though it looks pretty flat. Once it builds up to a certain point, there's what we call a time of concentration, where that water is leaving and flowing to a branch, to a tax ditch, to a wetland someplace. And then we look at that analysis point for the 2, 10, and 100 and see what the flows are coming off of that property. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's the basis of it. Is most projects discharge somewhere, and then in the state regulations, you are allowed to discharge to that same point at a pre-development rate up to the 100-year storm. So it'll still flow to the same location. So property owner can't say, if the water has historically come to them forever and ever, they can't say, nope, I'm not taking it. State regulations are that the water can still flow to that same point, but it has to be managed to a pre-development rate.
To a pre-development rate.
Right.
And that's measured by, is it gallons or inches? What is the unit? It's the 9.2,
So those are the, so
Yeah.
we have different design storms.
right?
So the design storm, and we'll just use the 100-year because that's the most extreme. So the 100-year is the 9.2 inches. So in that storm event, they're going to look at, and they use HydroCAD models, they're going to look at the type of soil. So there's different classifications to the soil. They're going to look at the slope, which is going to tell us exactly what the slope is. They're going to look at the land cover. And then we're going to figure out, during that storm event, in that time of concentration with those conditions, how much CFS, cubic feet per second, is leaving that property in those different design storms. And so and that's what they're doing. It's going to be analyzed to these different discharge points.
All right, so I was completely misinformed. Perhaps I didn't understand what I was told before with the idea of water that originates on a property. It can actually move to an adjacent parcel. Is
Yeah, water is going to have to flow.
right,
Yeah, it's going to have to flow somewhere.
right.
It's just how much is acceptable for it to flow. And like I said, there are some situations where there wasn't a discharge, that property was a bowl shape. And unfortunately, they have to deal with that design challenge of how do you manage something that didn't have an outlet. But most of our projects, do. There's ditching that's been done, whether it's tax ditch, public ditch, branches, wetlands. Typically, the water flows somewhere. Each project is unique. Each one has its own challenges. Some require easements for outfalls. Each situation is different. But to answer your question, they are allowed to discharge off-site.
Okay, I have a couple more. Do you mind?
Well, I have one that builds on this sort of,
Oh, please.
so in the case where you said that you're designing the system so that it flows onto other people's properties at a certain rate. And the Sussex Conservation District is tasked with approving those plans, inspecting those plans and so on. What liability, if any, does the Conservation District have if the system does not operate as it's designed?
Right. And that's a good question. Typically during construction, there will be red flags depending on what type of stormwater facility is there. And the public, I'll be honest, the public is quick to call. So, that whole accessibility thing in Sussex County, the phone calls start coming in and then we can go out and inspect and see what's working, what's not working. If there's a problem with the plan, then there's notes on the plan that says that we have the right to request modifications to the plan. So if something is not working, and we believe that there's an error of some sort, we'll re-engage the engineer and the developer and we'll say we have to fix this. We have to go back to the drawing board. So this is when things are under construction, that typically occurs. There are also notes on the plan where, that developer is responsible for obtaining, it does not give him the right to discharge. He is responsible for obtaining any other easements, agreements for the discharge. So like our approval doesn't give him permission to discharge. We verify that it complies with the regulations, but that developer is still responsible for obtaining any required agreements and easements.
So if I can follow on to Andrew's question and Tim's, and this is by no means a criticism at all on Sussex County Conservation. I recognize you are operating to state regulations, and you and I talked way back when I first came on Planning Commission. The 100-year storm event is a historical storm that has not been updated.
Right.
And last time I checked, we were nearly at 400-year storms in the last 10 years. And that's because one of them was like 9.1 inches. So since that is such a critical basis for the design, what can we, who should we lobby? I know this is at the federal level, but we're building things that we know, or I think I know, are not going to be designed
Right.
to the storm events that we potentially going to see. And once again, I understand you can't unilaterally do this, but
Right.
some guidance would be helpful.
So the 100-year design storm changed in 2006. So it went from 7.9 inches in 24 hours to 9.2. That was the last time that the design storm changed. However, the regulations have changed in 2019, where we are managing the 100-year. In previous years, we did not manage the 100-year storm. We only safely conveyed it. So in older projects, they would manage the 2 and 10-year storm events to pre-development rates and safely convey the 100. However, that has changed in recent years when we are now also managing the 100. So our regulations have become stricter in that sense.
And I recognize that, and it's a step in the right direction. I'm kind of concerned as an engineer of the structural stability of a lot of these storm ponds, especially the ones that are being built with berms, that once you overtop them, you all know this, you overtop them, they're gone.
Right. No, I understand there are some projects in parts of Lewis that are tidally influenced and then, could, if you get a significant tidal surge, could be impacted. We do look at some of that in the stormwater calculations. Different embankment ponds are required to have freeboard, where they build that top of bank up higher. There are safety features that are kind of built in. Is it going to be something that captures every storm event? Probably not. I mean, there's going to be some that exceed the design storm. And in those events, we do anticipate a certain level of flooding. That is true.
Yeah, because I mean, and I'll stop after this. I mean, we've all seen over the last couple of years, the 15 to 50-inch rains post-hurricane, isolated incident. And those are, the 50-inch probably no one's going to protect against unless we build Glen Canyon.
Right.
But the, building enough margin in. I think Joe had.
I had a question. It has to do more with construction. I've watched a couple of the developments go in, and I've noticed that during the construction phase, there is a lot of sediment that's running off. I mean, a lot of mud, and it's going down, and it's actually settling in a lot of the stormwater pipes. And I also noticed that the pipes coming out of developments are very large, but then they go into smaller pipes and then even smaller pipes and backs up. And once it goes down and subsides, it's deposited a lot of mud in the piping. It's clogging things. So do they worry about flow getting from one point, and it could be a 2-mile flow area where they really need to give thought to from the inception where the new development might be going in, which maybe it was a bowl before, to where it's ending up when it's running through someone's backyard at 4 feet high.
Right. So what happens for a project if it discharges off-site? Like if it goes through, we talked about if it goes through drainage section, we have to get permission from that agency for discharge to a tax ditch. If it goes to DelDOT to their right of way, we also, the developer engineer has to get permission from DelDOT, and they look at those pipe sizing and the inverts and all of that. And DelDOT's engaged from that initial pre-application meeting as well. Of, do we have a history of flooding? Are there problems in this particular location? So the great thing is, the agencies do talk. We are all communicating. If it discharges into a town system, we're actually supposed to get permission from the town to accept the water. So depending on those particular projects, we have to get a letter from you guys saying, hey, there is capacity here. Calculations get reviewed. So those things do happen. In regards to the sediment that you discussed, this winter was brutal. And we did have, our sediment erosion controls, it exceeded their capability. So for silt fence and different controls, it's good for about a 1-inch rain event. And then it'll start to exceed, those events, exceed the capacity, the capability of some of those features. So we did have some issues and we're trying to address that.
Okay, and I guess to follow up, you mentioned something I was thinking about. You said towns.
Mhm.
Towns need to get permission. There's apparently some work you do between each other when you're working in small towns, and I guess we would qualify as a town or a city. Do we have a right as a town to set up any regulations that would supersede your limits?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
And how is that accomplished, actually?
I believe you would have to adopt town code. You can't be less restrictive, but you can be more restrictive than
Right.
state regulations.
And that would be a matter of the city developing the code and then just, and then you all become compliant. You become that enforcement piece.
That's I'm not really sure. I don't know, Dave, you would answer that.
That aspect of it would be up to negotiation with, you know, in this case, Lewes, to say how, if you decide to go above and beyond the state requirements,
Right.
institute your local requirements, we would just have to have a discussion of what's going to be in the conservation district's purview, what does the city want to take responsibility for, or if you'd like it for us to do it all, we could do that. But we'd have to have a thorough understanding of.
Sure. Do you have
What the
any
council-
examples of where a municipality has actually developed more strict standards and has formed that relationship with the SCD?
Not with SCD.
Okay,
Everybody has stayed within the state's requirements
right.
at this time.
I have a couple more questions, if you don't mind. I'll do this real quickly. Are you familiar with the term net fill? And does that come under, does that fall into your basket at all of things?
No, I guess are you talking about like in a flood zone, in a flood area? No, that does not.
I think that's what I'm talking about. One of the things that I have a concern about is, of course, as engineering develops, practices change and so forth, and the stormwater management plans that were developed 20, 30 years ago, have evolved. And I'd like to think that they're getting better, but I'm also aware of the fact that financial pressures to reap the benefit of development of land that otherwise would have been never considered for development because of location, they all of a sudden become targeted for development. And fill is frequently brought in and used to accommodate or create what I call a plateau that did not exist in nature, but it allows the homes to be elevated. And the ripple effect of that, of course, is how it changes the flow of water, stormwater that used to pass over that same parcel of land.
That's not under our authority. I think in Sussex County reviews for that, kind of those net fill, whatever that analysis is, we're filling in a flood zone area.
So I'm sorry, did you say that is under your?
It is
No,
not.
It's not.
So
So it's Sussex County?
yeah, so we're the sediment and stormwater program. We're just looking for sediment and erosion control and stormwater management. Properties that are in Sussex County that are filling in a flood zone, they do have to go through some type of analysis with Sussex County. You can't just fill it. You do have to do some type of analysis, but I don't know the ins and outs of that since that's under their authority.
But the stormwater management pond that might be created on such a site that I've just described would fall still under your oversight. Is that correct?
It does. So basically, we are looking at how that location of that project in the watershed and how they're complying with the discharges leaving that project. So the fill does change the time of concentration, how the water is leaving the project, and the stormwater facility will be there to mitigate whatever land use decisions that they do. However, we're not looking at that analysis of the fill that was placed, the flood zone area that was lost. It's not in our regulations, but I would recommend you refer to what the county has in their code.
Okay, thank you for that tip. And one more, I think. Yeah, I've noted, I was going through your PowerPoint prior to this meeting, and I came across the term cooperators. I think that's how you pronounce that. Is that right?
Yep.
Can you describe what a cooperator is?
So typically the cooperator has always been an ag farmer, somebody who was working with the district on conservation practices. And as Sussex County has evolved, the cooperator has also evolved. So it's not just farmers that we're working with anymore. We're working with homeowners, we're working with developers, we're working with developers, engineers, all these different individuals who are working and finding conservation solutions. So, what traditionally was always thought as just being an ag farmer has evolved because we continue to evolve to meet the needs of Sussex County.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting though. I think you called them the board, your board of supervisors.
Mhm.
I have appreciation for people who do volunteer work, and I'm assuming this is volunteer work. But I'm aware of the fact that most of these folks tend to be farmers, and that's an admirable way of making a living, but it is, there's a reduction in the number of people in that population, at least here in the eastern part of the county. And I wonder if people in residential communities are being well represented, on this board.
So the composition of the board is spelled out by state code.
Right,
And it does call for, and it specifically calls out farmers
yes,
to be our elected positions. And then there are two positions that are more or less an at-large position that are nominated by the SCD Board of Supervisors, but the formal appointment comes from the Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control.
right,
So that is another two seats. And then we have a representative from County Council.
right.
And then we also have a non-voting board member who is the Ag Extension Agent from the University of Delaware.
So he's ex officio, right, with no vote.
But those are all by statute
Right,
as far as the composition of the board.
right. All right.
So, yeah, I was gonna say a couple more questions.
Okay, so I think I understand the hierarchy. DENRAC writes the rules for sediment and stormwater control. You analyze the plans and approve them. Where does enforcement come in? What's in your toolbox for enforcement? And does it extend only through construction, or does it apply after a project is complete if somebody destroys their plan or? Right.
So the hierarchy is actually EPA to DENREC and then to us. And so that's a good question in regards to enforcement. Now, we use the tools available to us, which is holding up building permits. They need a copy of our standard permit in order to get a building permit. So that's kind of how we kind of leverage compliance on different projects. Is that, and they want the building permit. So we hold them up if there's any kind of violation. If we cannot gain compliance at our level, then we do engage DENREC, and then it becomes another level. DENREC will come in and step in and take over the project. They have taken over, it's mostly construction projects. It's not typically a project that's under the maintenance responsibility of an HOA. I've never seen that occur. It's typically just non-compliance with a developer.
Robert,
Have you,
your question made me think of something else. You mentioned permitting. When you work with a party for permitting, usually they have to go to the county before they go to, I guess, the local municipality for their permits. Do you communicate your requirements and what's going to go on that property to the local building authorities or the planning department? Do you work together on that?
And I forgot just to answer your question too, we collect bonds as well. So every project, so we do collect performance bonds for projects. So I forgot to answer that. So what happens, they have to come to our office and get a permit from us before they go to Sussex County. So they would need a copy of our permit that says that builder, whoever fills it out, is agreeing to the conditions of that permit. It's called a residential standard plan. They're agreeing to put silt fence, stone construction entrance, stabilize. There's a whole litany of things that they're required to do. Now, there isn't an in-depth conversation between like the planning and zoning and our office. But I mean, we all know the process of like, they have to have this approved permit from our office in order to get a building permit. And then we're overseeing that land use activity. So like if there's issues with the builder, we're inspecting that.
So if they come into Lewes and they're doing a project in Lewes, you more than likely would have contact with our planning department somewhere along the road now?
No, I mean, so what'll happen for us is if it's a development, some of your larger subdivisions that are under construction, we are actively in those communities. I don't think that we've had continuous regular communication, maybe on an as needed basis over the years for different projects.
But if you see a problem, do you let our building and zoning know there's a problem going.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have on every, there's a lot of problems, so I don't think that we're like communicating on the regular on every single project, but I think if it's a significant enough problem, that yes, we do engage the office. So,
Are you all involved? I think I heard you say earlier about dust control. Did I hear that correctly?
that is
It-
true. They are, under their plan, they are required to manage dust.
Okay,
Yeah.
and is that dust just that is, with high winds that's created as the wind moves across the land, or is it from the truck traffic coming in and out of a job site? And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's gonna be from the activity, so like if they're actively on the site,
Right.
if it's just a windy day, but nobody's out there actively working, there's not a whole lot that we can do. Because putting trucks on it to water it, I'm not sure it's gonna negate the dust, do you know what I mean? It's still windy days, and you're gonna have a certain amount of dust. But if they are actively driving across the project and we'll do certain things like ask them to drive slower, they should have a water truck on site. Or we may have to tell them to stop. Like if it's that bad of a day and they aren't actively addressing it, we will tell them that they have to stop work for the day.
And do you all also, is it your responsibility for dirt, mud that is dragged on from tires onto city streets? Is that yours?
That is part of us too. Yep,
Okay.
we would tell them they have to clean it up and then maybe refresh the construction entrance for the project, but that would be under us.
Okay.
Yep.
That's helpful to know.
Any other questions from the table? Okay, I want to give a few more minutes to questions from the audience. Before we go to Terry, Charlie, I saw you raising your hand on the question regarding to net fill. Did you have something to add to that?
I think the question was related to the floodplain and, in Lewes, your code says that there's no net loss of floodplain. And you actually have a floodplain administrator who I believe is Janelle. And our floodplain code is robust inside section 197 with a lot of requirements. Every time a subdivision plan comes in, she and I review it against that code in much detail. And there's always information if there's any part of the project that's in the floodplain related to no net loss, they have to provide a report that describes and mathematically that they're not losing any floodplain storage.
Thanks, Charlie. Terry?
Yes. Thank you. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to stand so that I can look at you as I'm asking you a question. First, I must say that this meeting was really extraordinary in the way that information was being provided and for the very, very interesting questions that were asked today. I must say that I feel that I'm much better informed now than I was before the meeting. So we really have done a very big step forward. I just wanted to clarify maybe some points with you. One of them is a follow-up on the question that was asked by Mr. Panetta. The way I left my understanding of how you qualify the water management facilities that are being built by the developers is that you were looking at the data from the 2015 FEMA flood maps, and that was the data that you were using for the 100-year flood risk. Now, you said something very important in your presentation. You said that actually since 2019, you have been actually updating your models to reflect more recent hydrologic or weather data. Is that correct? And to take an example, for instance, with the one big project which has not yet been reviewed by the city council, which is Henlopen Bluff. You're probably familiar with it. Does this mean that you will actually integrate in the qualification of these facilities, these water management facilities, data that is more recent than the 2015 data, which is basically going back to half of your career, if I understand, and a lot of things have changed since then. So that's my first question. And my second question is on the performance bond. I was not aware of the existence of these performance bonds. I want to make sure that I understand how they work. If we look at an HOA, for instance, which built a water management facility 10 years ago when the project was developed. Does this mean that this performance bond is still in effect today, and that if the facility fails, you can actually call on the bond if the HOA is not remediating the failure of their facility? Or does the bond expire when the project receives the occupancy permit or some other event? Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
I'll answer the second one first because that's the easier one. So the bonding is in place. So when they start a project, they post a bond, a performance bond, and everything's on our website. So you can see all of it, all of our policy procedures. So once that project has as-built approval, once we have verified that that stormwater facility was constructed correctly and has the appropriate storage volume, which is, that's a challenging process in itself. But once you have verified that, and we know that it's functioning correctly, stabilized, good working condition, they're then eligible for a bond reduction, a one-time reduction. But depending on the stage of construction, meaning if most of the project is done, they could go to a warranty phase. But if it's still a lot of construction activity, it just goes to a bond reduction. Now, the warranty phase, if they make it to the warranty phase, it's 2 years or building completion, whichever occurs first. And then there would be, when it's turned over to an HOA, there are no bonds in place. Everything's been verified, as-built approved, fully stabilized. And granted, we've been through countless storms, like we've weathered them all together. Do you know what I mean? Like we have watched this pond function, for up to 10 to 15 years. So at some point it gets turned over, but there's no continuous bond in place. Okay, so the second question, so I think we're talking about two different things. So like the flood zones is established by the federal government. So I think that's what we're talking about, is whatever those flood zones, like every couple of years, they come out with updated flood mapping. So that whatever is most current, that's what design engineers are supposed to be using for their flood mapping. The 100-year design storm is, we are looking at the routing of that storm event. What's a 100-year storm event as that occurs on that property, where it gets conveyed and how it gets managed in the stormwater facility. So we're talking about two different things. And the 100-year design storm can change. That's also depending on the federal government. But the flood maps, which I think is what you're referring to, that gets updated every so many years. We get new maps, and that's what the design engineers should be using, is whatever's most current.
Yeah, and if I could just interject, my question was about climate, was about rain events and the 9.2 inch rainfall. It was not about the flood maps. And that was my point, that
Mine was global about all water.
Right.
events,
Right.
And how resilient are these facilities going to be? My concern is, are you using data, for instance, for Hamilton Bluff, which reflects what has happened in the past, say, 3 years, where we had a great increase in the level of water at the ground level, and also a great increase in the level of curiosity, which all contributes to these ponds much faster and with greater volume.
Stick it, Sanj. There you go.
Whoops, sorry. Thank you. Well, I think you heard what I said, right? I mean, it's just my concern is all sources of water contributing to filling these ponds principally, and the risk that eventually one of them would failure being defined as going above the level that you have mentioned, and water spillings in the neighborhoods or in the Great Marsh. My understanding for instance, for the last project that I looked at in detail, which was Fisher's Cove, and we had a comment from Bob Hafferman recently, who is on our planning commission, was that the data that was used was actually data that was 10 years old when the design was done. And obviously the water that is going to come in those ponds when Fisher's Cove is finished is not going to be based on the data of 10 years ago. It's going to be based on what happened in the past 2, 3, 4 years. So my concern, and that's in the past, there's nothing we can do about Fisher's Cove anymore, but we still have a lot of developable land in the city, including Open Bluff, which has not been approved yet, but also some other properties like the 4th Street Forests and other, which maybe will never be developed if things go as the city hopes, but who knows, you know? So that's my question, you know, are you actually now using data that is fresher and more reflective of water events of all sources when you design the facilities to make sure that they are resilient and will not fail 10, 15, 20 years down the road?
Right. Good question.
Oh. So, so whatever the flood mapping, whatever is most current, so like Fisher Cove, if they use 2015 flood mapping, it was approved in 2021. So, you know, now it's 10 years old, but that information, you know, wasn't that old, you know, when the project was approved in 2021. But whatever is the current mapping is what we're using. Whatever is the current 100-year design storm is what we're using. So whatever, that's what the developer engineer will be tasked with. Whatever the most current information that's available is what they're supposed to be using.
Yeah.
And I
think-
can't control that,
and
unfortunately.
just to reemphasize one of the points you made earlier, is what changed in 2019 was it went from just managing the 100-year storm or designing for it to water quality management. So it raised the bar, but it's still using the old data. But it basically de facto increases the margin of safety. Is that correct, Jessica?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
I just want to say something, because I think we may be getting confused, because 100-year floodplain is different than 100-year rain event. So it's completely, I think you understand, but a lot of people may not. 100-year floodplain has to do with the level of water that's on a floodplain map. The 100-year rain event is the 9.4 inches per 24 hours and so that's mainly what SCD reviews against, is the 9.4 inches. And you're right, you changed it in 2019 such that they don't safely convey the 100-year rain event, but they actually manage it now. The floodplain is a whole different, and I guess that's a question. Do you consider like a tailwater elevation of a 100-year floodplain? Yeah. So, I mean, I think Jessica's exactly right. Her review is only as good as the data that's available, like the 2015 floodplain maps and the 2006 rain event data.
Yeah, and so they're two separate issues. I know they need to be looked at holistically, but they're two separate, both technical and regulatory issues.
Yeah, I mean, you understand that for some reason. This is a little bit complex. Just one last question on this topic. The fact that you're using data, you know, which is somewhat aged, is that because you are under some sort of regulatory obligation to do so? Or would you have the ability, if you felt that there is more recent data available that the developer has elected not to use, would you be able to actually prescribe yourself that you want more recent data to be used in various calculations?
I mean, I don't have the ability to require a developer to exceed the stormwater regulations. However, if there's certain, we have conversations with them of, hey, there's a problem here, you need to go above and beyond. I mean, there have been conversations on different projects where a developer has exceeded the regulations because of a need, because of either a flooding, some type of downstream impact, whatever it may be. But I don't have the authority to require it. But most of the time, we're able to get developed, when it's reasonable, we're able to get them to do certain things. Yep.
All right, Andrew, you think you should probably call this?
Yeah, if we have one more question from the audience, maybe, and otherwise, I think,
We have lots more on the agenda today.
I think the other thing, for anyone that might represent an HOA that has a stormwater management facility, I think just the thing also to take away is that they offer the free technical assistance and review. So, if you, I'd encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity. All right, so I think the next agenda item has to do with capital projects, which I assume, Charlie, are you going to take us through something, or how do you want to handle that part of the discussion? And I want to thank
I can definitely do it.
hold on, before you
Yeah,
guys, I did want to thank Jen, the and Jessica for coming and all the opportunities. And as Tom said, you've always been very professional anytime you've appeared before the city and prepared. And we really appreciate you coming today and making yourself available to our community. Appreciate it.
All right, Charlie.
I didn't prepare a PowerPoint like I sometimes
Thank
do, but I
goodness.
think we can.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
I thought you enjoyed them there all this time.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to leave, you're welcome to, or stay and enjoy the fun.
Yeah. We've got no refreshments, but
Yeah.
Charlie promised not to have a PowerPoint, so at least there's that.
So we can just go down one by one on the agenda, Hornkill Avenue. So what we have submitted on behalf of the Board of Public Works and the city is an SRF loan application to both DNREC and the Office of Drinking Water in the amount of roughly $2.6 million. $1.8 million of that is sanitary sewer, and $0.8 million is water. And that includes total restoration of the street. The reason why the sewer is significantly higher is that it includes some pretty good improvements to the pump station that's 2/3 of the way down Hornkill Avenue, because if you've ever been down there, it sits right in the middle of the road. So we want to probably make some improvements to that. Irregardless of the project specifics, we've put in for $2.6 million. And that includes not only the outside city corporate limits section, but also inside city corporate limits section all the way to Pilottown Road. So it's from Pilottown Road all the way to the end, $2.6 million, completely new water and sewer system and street restoration. That pre-application was submitted to DNREC and Office of Drinking Water in January, and that project has been prioritized by both of those entities for funding. So if the city and the board and the city decide to move forward with that project, we would submit a full application, because what I've submitted thus far is just a preliminary application by late June. And the full application, we've done them a lot, so we can get it done, but we would need to know if you want to do that. And then they would put it into their queue for developing what the funding mechanism would be. They are still running, to my knowledge, at 2% loans over 20 or 30-year time frame. We might want to look at a 30-year time frame. I think it would qualify because the infrastructure that we're putting in the ground certainly has a life expectancy of greater than 30 years. So I think they would be acceptable to that. And then that would spread the payments back on that loan over 30 years, which could be helpful for at least the out of city section. The other surprising part of that project is that when the project was prioritized by the Office of Drinking Water, it was also noted that it would receive some sort of subsidy through what is known as the base congressional fund. Don't ask me what that is. Okay, it's a fund that both the NREC and the Office of Drinking Water have access to. That's grant funding. So that this project would receive some amount of grant funding. What's in that base congressional fund for the state of Delaware is $704,000. There were no other prioritized project across the whole state on the most recent list that mentioned base congressional funding. I'm hoping, but don't count on this, that entire $704,000 could go towards the project as grant funding. So that's where that project stands.
I had a question for you about the Office of Drinking Water.
Yes.
They chose that as a prioritized project. Why would they choose that? Was it because of the wells at the end of the street?
Yeah, and actually it was ranked number 1 by the Office of Drinking Water. And the reason is, of all the issues at the end of the street, not only just the fact that all those houses are still on wells, but that they're surrounded by septic systems, and that has more to do with the sewer system, but it affected the thought process of the Office of Drinking Water when they rank the projects. Mhm.
And is that congressional funding piece tied to the same calendar as the June deadline that you described?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah, none of the funding, whether it's a loan or subsidy, would go into effect unless the city and the board were to decide to submit a full application by nearly the end of June for that project.
And just for clarification, it's a joint meeting, so it's a city and the water, BPW. What would be the city's responsibilities and what would be the BPW's responsibilities?
Gotcha. So this is even this project's even more unique in that the end of the street that's outside city limits right now, I think everybody assumes that the responsibility for that infrastructure improvement would fall upon the residents, those 11 or 12 residents at the end of the street.
Right.
So I'm taking that out, that cost of that portion out of the calculation. So the remainder of what's already in city limits, the city would be responsible for approximately $367,000, and the board would be responsible for $1.68 million. The biggest piece of that project, obviously, is the water and sewer infrastructure, including the pump station. Repaving the street is a relatively minor cost in the total project. Because there's no curb or gutter or sidewalks or anything out there.
But you're saying even the street restoration could be done at the 2% over a 20, 30 year?
It's inside the loan request right now, yes.
And that's a mill and overlay, or is it a reconstruction of old streets that really need a more robust solution?
It includes 6 inches of base stone, and I can't remember if I had 3.5 or 4 inches of asphalt on top of it. I think it was 3.5 because it's not a heavily traveled road.
So.
Sure.
I mean, the thing is by the time we put the new water and sewer in, we're going to have a lot of that road disturbed already.
I got a question, maybe.
And that's the whole, excuse me, Andrew, that's the entire length of the road, correct?
Well, yeah, but
So-
the 367 is just from Pilot Town to the existing city limit line.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, but I think when we first talked about this project, it wasn't anticipated that section from Pilot Town Road
Correct.
was not, we did not anticipate that was going to
But
be affected. But
yeah, and
I
then
understand.
a logical decision was made to do the whole street since we're doing the end of
Okay.
it. Yep.
I've got a question for probably maybe for Mike and Alex. Like, what sort of signal does Charlie need if from a corporate connected to action is before June? Is it a consensus here, or do we need to have BPW act first and then the city say we're good for the streets, or how do you see that working?
This is discussion. We're not
Oh.
making decisions tonight.
It's still in my life, if we might want to think about that in your timeline.
Right.
But certainly, each body could make some recommendations. I also have all my stuff here.
No worries. And I don't know, your mic might not have been working, Alex, so I didn't catch everything. But no, I mean, this is something that I believe, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, this is something we anticipate having on a board agenda in May. So there would be an action of the board to approve the application. So Mayor, I would envision and anticipate a similar piece for the city's portion. One thing that we should connect, and Alex and I can connect on, is being clear on who's approving what and making sure that application says that, and we can connect on that.
Thanks.
And the annexation is critical to determining where the funding can be used, because the other part gets annexed into the city. It could be, the funding can be used for the whole thing.
I don't think the DNREC or the Office of Drinking Water have skin in the game of whether it's annexed in or not.
Right, right.
Well, but the funds would be coming to the city and BPW.
The funds would be coming to the BPW. The BPW would submit the application.
Right.
You'd have your separate arrangement with the city and each resident. Once the project's completed, you'd have an agreement with each resident for their payback.
Right. Charlie, speaking of Hornkill, in your familiarity with that street
Mhm.
and so forth, have you given any thought to the need for stormwater management? And and
I don't know that it needs stormwater management per se. I think that we would, and what I've included in the estimate is addressing it on a spot basis. Similar to what we did in Highland Acres, where we identified some areas that were holding water and we regraded the best we could to make, and we actually achieved it and made those situations much better. That's all we have in the project right now. I don't have catch basins and piping
and you're not suggesting curbing and guttering, is that
no,
correct?
absolutely not. No. Well, it's not in the estimate. Yes.
Right. Right. Thank you.
Moving on.
Yep.
Okay. Monroe and Railroad Avenue. Let me pull that up just so I have it in front of me. So, I feel like we've talked about this one a lot. I know we are, I want to say 60 to 70% completed with our design. We're working through Jessica's office on the Sussex Conservation District permit requirements. And also with DelDOT regarding, discharge into their system on Kings Highway. And I believe these projects have been, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they've been budgeted by both the city and the board. I guess I should know this, but I don't, whether it's just railroad in the FY25, or is it both projects, just railroad or just Monroe? Just Monroe. Okay. So I've got a total project cost estimate of $2.755 million. That's for both streets. 1.455 million of that would be the city and 1.3 million of that would be the BPW. If it's just Monroe, it's $710,000 and for the city, and then $750,000 for the BPW. And that sounds like what would be part of what's included in FY25.
Monroe.
Monroe.
And is that Monroe from Freeman intersection?
No.
No.
That's from Kings Highway to just beyond the railroad intersection. So we're not going to the bike trail.
And why does that need to be done?
That section of the road.
Yeah.
So the infrastructure is old and aging, and it was decided by the city. Well, the road is also old and aging. And so when we decided to upgrade the road, we decided to put sidewalks in as well and multi-use pathways.
And some stormwater management too.
Oh yeah, but it already has catch basins, but we would replace those and
curb and guttering where there isn't any now.
absolutely, yes.
Right.
Oh, and don't forget on both these streets, Monroe and Railroad, this is a little caveat you should be aware of, is that we are putting in permeable paver parallel parking systems on one side of the road. And through the board and the city, we have submitted for FEMA funding through two different FEMA 75 to 90% grant funding for that part of the project from FEMA, but two different sources to increase our likelihood of gaining those funds. But we have not heard back yet on that, although our representative at University of Delaware, Chase Barnes, is really good. He keeps us, hey, I haven't heard back. I haven't heard back. So when we do hear, when he hears something, we'll know right away. So we probably would wait to bid that project until we know if we're getting that funding or not.
One other thought. I know Ellen Grant had mentioned at one point when we were talking about this. I think there was a pretty sizable grant associated with the Monroe project, wasn't there?
I think that's what Charlie's referring to when it comes to stormwater management.
So the thing is, we had talked about this, if the project wouldn't go forward, we would lose that grant money. So it's probably important to go ahead and.
Well, we haven't gotten it yet. Yeah, we haven't gotten it yet. We're still waiting to hear back from FEMA. Yeah, it's just when you go through the state, you hear back pretty fast. When you go through FEMA, you don't hear back fast. Yeah.
Do you have any idea how long fast is or?
You know, I thought, and maybe Alan, Lorraine and Robin can help me on that. I thought we were going to hear back pretty soon because I thought it was part of the funding cycle that we got the grant money for West Cedar flood mitigation and the pump station study work. You know what? Councilperson Ritzert, I'll check in with Chase tomorrow and just try to get back to Ellen Marine with
Do
that.
you think it could be this calendar year?
I think so. Yeah, I really do. Yeah. Ben, do you have any clue on that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll check in and give you a better answer.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah, it's back on me. All right.
So Charlie, here if I can ask you to break into two parts, because I noticed that on the city agenda, it says 4th Street and then side streets.
Yes.
So if we talk about 4th Street and then.
Yes, absolutely. So 4th Street was also a project that the board with the city, I'm pretty sure, decided to submit for SRF loan. We submitted SRF loan pre-applications at the same time that we did Hornkill. And when we did that, we had the street in it, but not the curb and gutter and the sidewalks. And that was a $4.4 million request split up between both entities, some for the water and some for the sewer. And then we all sort of got together and said, well, let's try to get the curb and the gutter and the sidewalks in there as well. And we've also already talked to DNREC and the Office of Drinking Water. And what they've asked us to do is to, when we submit the full application, if the city and the board decide to do so in late June, to put in for the total amount, which would be $5.5 million total. And that's from Front Street to Burton Avenue, all new water, sewer, stormwater, street, curbs, ADA compliant sidewalks, and that's pretty much it.
Where, you help me out. You said front to Burton Avenue?
Did I say front?
Yeah. Yeah. Is that what you meant?
You meant Savannah.
I was just checking to see if Sharon was awake.
Oh,
Savannah.
I am.
Savannah to Burton. Savannah to Burton. My mistake. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Savannah to Burton.
Savannah
My
to
mistake.
Burton.
And you said that was
$5.5 million for that entire project. That, like I said, it includes water, sewer, stormwater, street, sidewalk, curb and gutter, ADA ramps, etc.
But just 4th Street.
Just 4th Street. So like I said, we submitted for 4.4. It got prioritized also by both entities, Office of Drinking Water and DNREC. So it's a project that if we pursue it, it will get funding. And they've also said that, hey, we've increased the scope, submitted as part of the full application in June. And they would also fund that part of it too.
And it was rated very high, if I remember. 4th.
It was rated high on one and a little less on the other. So it was rated 4th. It was 12th on sewer and 4th on water.
This
Yes.
is statewide. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So these are applications submitted across the entire state. So when I say it was ranked 12th, it was ranked 12th out of the total of 15 projects that they will fund this year. So, I mean, it's still, as long as you're inside the priority line, you're getting funded. And a lot of these projects drop out too. That's been my experience. Not a lot, a few of them will, a couple of them. One of them may. But usually there's at least one or two that drop out because they don't want to do the project for whatever reason.
Right. And this is What are the terms for this? This is,
So that would be likely a similar term, 2% over 20 or 30 years. Whatever we can negotiate with them in terms of that length. I say 2%, you know, we're all aware that interest rates have creeped up a little bit. Well, I mean, interest rates have been up for how long now? A couple of years at least. So
Right.
they've been sticking with the 2% since then. So I'm hoping they're going to stick with it, even though they've inched up a little bit more over the last few months.
is there any opportunity for the idea of conversion of overhead utilities to underground for that corridor?
We have not included it in the project scope right now.
Well, we're already at
That would be a
5.9.
question that we'd
know,
have to
but the time
discuss
to do
with
it
the
is now.
BPW.
Pardon?
That would be a question or, you know, scope of the work that would need to be handled with the BPW and decide whether we want to pursue
Right.
that or not.
Right.
Like I've always told you guys, when you do that, there's the electrical portion, which would fall on the BPW, but you also have to get Verizon and Comcast involved. Which they used to be great 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Now you can't get answers. And then when you do, it's really expensive to do the work.
Mhm.
Along with that, Councilman Mercer, would be the notion of maybe getting some of the natural gas brought in at the same time we do the underground electric.
Yeah, I want to check on that because isn't the hospital served
Yes, they are.
from 4th Street?
Everything just about, it's service.
Right. And
Yeah, I think it's already in there. We just need to locate it, make sure we don't run into it when we do our work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, but also make it
Isn't
available
the
to.
retirement community, yes,
Who?
the retirement,
The Harbor Health.
the nursing home.
Harbor Healthcare, yeah. Yeah, they're all.
Yeah, they have it.
Yeah.
That's a whole
I
different
don't,
story.
somebody said something over here about whether the homes on 4th Street have had the opportunity to hook up, and I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
No,
I don't think they,
no.
Yeah, we'd have to check on that.
No, that was not an opportunity.
yeah, but we would like. to
I don't
make
quite
it-
understand that. If they got the main out there, why they wouldn't allow the service into the house.
That's a
But,
different conversation.
and that we can, I can definitely check on that. Yeah.
I can work with you on that, okay?
Okay. I don't know. Do you want to handle the side streets as well?
Yes,
Well,
go for
I
it.
just, yeah, let me just predicate this with, nothing has been put into the state yet for the side streets. We have until June to amend the NOI. We will, until we just understand what the funding is available, we won't know how to. But Charlie, if you want to talk to what the cost of that project would be.
Yeah.
Inside. Oh, let me just, one more thing, is that as we do 4th Street, we would get coupons from all the side streets, which would tell us a lot about what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And, so. if that-
Yeah, so if you remember, if you recall from my previous presentations, when we do 4th Street, we'll run the water and sewer out beyond the 4th Street right away to Park Avenue, DuPont, Painter Avenue, Johnson Street. All those will extend the water and sewer beyond the 4th Street right away so that if and when those streets are completed, you don't have to get back into the 4th Street right away. You can just make the connection on the street that you're working on. So with that said, and I think I should caveat and start this out by saying that we went in for 4.4 million on 4th Street. We asked them if we could raise it to 5.5. They've said yes. I don't know if we were to add, say, any one of these side streets, if there's enough funding available for them to say to us, yeah, just put it in your full application in June. It may not be available. I'd have to check. I have not asked that question
So
yet.
The public understands, we're talking about $5 million.
Yeah, so if you, so from Park Avenue, what we decided on the board level was to go from Front Street or Pilottown Road to
Savannah, whichever-
to Johnson Street and replace all the water, sewer and stormwater. And then also make improvements to the street, sidewalk and curb as necessary. And there's a lot of little caveats to that. So technical caveats, like certain sections are pretty new that we probably don't need to address. So anyway, when I figured that all up, Park Avenue from Front Street to Johnson Avenue, with all that work being done, would be an additional $5.244 million.
That's from front all the way to Johnson?
Yes,
Is that
that
what you said?
entire length. Park Avenue, 5.244 million.
American, huh?
So my question is this, if the grant, the NOI, if it would not be accepted as part of this grant, and if it would, what are the two dates that we'd be looking at in terms of getting the Burton subdivision done?
That is up, and I don't think it's subject for this meeting. However, we're meeting with the Burton subdivision folks tomorrow, and then we'll take this up in our May board meeting. But we don't have enough information right now. And this is, as Charlie pointed, out, this is only Park. This is not even including Burton and Johnson.
And DuPont or Painter, yes.
So it's a very large dollar project. And we have $35 million in our 5-year plan for the whole city. So,
And Burton to Savannah is 5.5 right now.
Park Avenue from,
Front Street.
oh, you're talking 4th Street. Yeah, 4th Street from Burton to Savannah was 5.5, yes.
and I was just told, so when I said take coupons from the side streets, this is not from the newspaper. This is as they go in, cut a piece of pipe out.
Yeah.
And this way we have a sample of tuberculation, rust,
Yeah.
wall thickness, condition of pipe.
Yeah, corrosion on the outside, et cetera. Yeah,
Sorry for the jargon.
yep, it's okay.
So I guess, and I'm going to, again, raise a concern, and I don't mean to ruffle feathers, but I will. This has been brought up for a long time, this particular development. And in 1981, this was brought up. There were several articles written in the newspaper about the water in the Burton subdivision. I think it's extremely important that this be looked at and given priority. And I know I sit on city council and need to work with you, and I'll do what I need to do to help get this thing done, because I think that when I look at these other projects, I think some of those, they're very important, but when it comes to the water quality, this may pale in comparison.
So I'm gonna keep that once more and then we're gonna stop. We've had this on our plan since Robin, correct me here, 2021.
There's, yeah, at some point, some of it was,
Yeah,
some, like in 2021. Yeah.
and it did slip a year or so. But we've been doing, everyone knows, a lot of other projects, Pilot Town and so on. Secondly, we collectively feel that replacing 4th Street will greatly improve the water quality of the side streets. Because right now, everything is going down 4th Street and we're carrying all of the rust and silt from 4th Street. Third, we don't have the money to take on. And also, there aren't enough contractors out there to do 4th Street, Park, Burton, DuPont, Johnson at the same time. I mean, you know, so.
I understand that, and I'm trying to figure out how to get relief to some of the residents there so that when they turn on that tap water, they know that they can drink that water and that it will be safe and healthy for them. And what can be done to help us with that? Rather than putting in very expensive filtration systems and having to drink bottled water when we cook and live a lifestyle we didn't move here to live because of this water. And I'm done.
And that's why we're having routine meetings with the Burton folks, and we will keep them informed, listen to their concerns, and move forward. And the capital budget is a living document, And if we find things out or get money or whatever, we can adjust it. But I think it's best between the Burton subdivision folks, if they're comfortable with it, and BPW to work forward on this, because this is in BPW's charter.
Well, the issue is it's not being ignored. And it's going to be addressed.
You have a promise on that. I'm not feeling well.
We're not. Would you go to the mic for us?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just not feeling well again. I say this every time I come, and then I put faith in you, and then I come back and I get kicked down again, and I just don't feel it. You and I, Tom, have talked repeatedly about this, and I was assured that because there was money on 4th Street, and because we know the water condition in Burton, and because we've given you the documentation about the important historic nature of Burton as a minority community that's been ignored. Heard it again today. Yeah, we put John before, but ritzy pilot town, they got it. You didn't. We're just not feeling comfortable. We want a commitment from today, which is why we asked to be on the calendar and got bumped, because we have everybody in the room that needs to commit to this. And I'm just not feeling a commitment. I'm feeling now that we're going to ask for 4, maybe 5 for 4th Street. 4th Street does not have 100-year-old pipes. You tell me that the water is going to be better for me. Maggie woke up today with grit and dirt in her sink. That's going to be better for me because she's on 4th Street. So it's going to be better for her, but is it going to be better for me? Because I still have a 100-year-old pipe. Now, I'm happy to pass this around, but what we're really asking for today is a commitment from the 2 governing bodies that are here, that they're hearing us, that they appreciate the nature of our neighborhood, that they feel like there's environmental racist issues going on, that there's environmental justice concerns that are being raised nicely, but they're concerns. And people are, with the survey we took, forced to drink filtered water because they cannot drink what comes out of the tap.
So Robin, what's the age of the pipe on 4th Street?
It ranges, but there is some 100-year-old pipe, I'm pretty certain. Not all of it is, but there's, and just 4th Street's got to be done because it's like a thoroughfare for the water from the tower and the well field to get to the west side of town, including Burton subdivision and beyond. So I think it wouldn't be money well spent just to do Burton subdivision without doing 4th Street.
In 1995, the roads in Burton subdivision were ripped up, new curving was put in, the roads were completely replaced. They put in new T's into the houses, water meters. They did not replace any of the pipe when that was done 29 years ago. So my other question going along with that, that's only 29 years, is we're going to be expected to cover the cost of the paving in there, which was done 29 years ago. And I understand we need to work together on these things, but we do need to work together and we need to get this done. So we have the plans from 29 years ago. It shows where all the pipes were cut out, new meter tees were put in, and they didn't replace any of the water pipe when they were in there doing that.
And Joe, you and I have specifically discussed this before. We can't make right what was done 30 years ago. You know, there are things the city didn't do, there are things we didn't do, there's things that the state didn't do, but we can only start in 2024 and move forward. And I'm sorry you feel that way. That you're expressing concerns, but we've tried to be very open, and you know we have a lot to discuss tomorrow, and
And happy to work with you. We've been working with you in good faith.
I
We really
believe it.
have, and we've heard from you that you really are, and I'm sorry, I'm Brenda Afsel, 418 Park Avenue. But what I'm hearing today is not quite what I feel that I heard from you in your office. And we can talk about that tomorrow, but I will tell you, it's just, can I just see hands of people in the room who are here because, okay, this many. We were concerned about the issue and I can show you very quickly this is my filter before and after. And it was before the flushing, so it wasn't the flushing that was responsible for this. This is everyone's home in our subdivision. I thought in the beginning, maybe we should ask around and be sure that it just isn't Park Avenue. So we sent out a survey, a really simple survey asking for questions. Do you use the water that is provided, tap water? Do you drink it? 98% of the people that did the surveys do not drink the water. They use alternative sources. They've either put a whole filtration system on their home, which is me at a cost of $7,000. And I've heard 2 other people are doing the same. Pardon me. They use bottled water. They use pure filters, which aren't necessarily good for removing the iron, by the way. There's a cost for doing all of these things. What we also ask them is, why don't you use the water? It smells, it has ruined my dishwasher, it ruins my clothes. I'm afraid I don't want my pets to drink it. I have a special health issue. Sorry. And the odor issue. We've discovered that there are 2 people within those 4 blocks that have hemochromatosis. That's a genetic issue that if you are exposed to elevated levels of of iron, you really have to have your blood drawn every so often and removed. But the trouble is, once you find out you have hemochromatosis, you usually find out after the damage to your heart, your lungs, your liver, or your pancreas. So these people that have had this already have health issues. We have 2 people I know with cancer who have to have clean water. So what I'm asking you, if you can't fix our water, are you going to provide bottled water at every house in this community? Are you going to pay for the filters? Are you going to pay for our health issues? This has got to end somewhere, and it needs to be more than someone just saying, we're going to fix it. We don't know who to trust anymore. I mean, we're talking about 80 homes in this community. We had, and I don't want to break a confidence, but I'm going to anyway. A past mayor's wife who lives in this area called one of us to say, what do we do about the dark water that's coming out of my sink? This is inexcusable. We've known about it I've lived here 20 years. I got a filter in my whole house because I have this issue for 20 years. We all do. It has to stop. I'm sorry. I don't mean to sound radical. Didn't mean to come here and sound that way. Does anybody else in the group need to say anything?
Hi, my name's Bill Schmidt, 423 Park Avenue. All right, I just want to make sure you all see this. This is in front of my house. All right. See it? That's it. All right. And that was recently. It goes back, like they said, I can show you pictures from 214. You have somebody that says, we'll clean it up by cleaning up 4th Street. Well, I went around and took pictures from the last clean out. 4th Street was great. Go through the Burton. They all have some form of this there. That's it, right in front of my house, right? Before I get all upset, I do want to say I've worked with your staff, both of us. And I really do want you to know that I appreciate what they have done. Helped me out on a lot of things. I want you to understand the health implications, 2018, oncologist wrote a letter about the water in the Gazette. It said, people that have liver problems or kidney problems can't take more lead. It's alluded to. All right. Oh, thank you. Again, thank you again. So here's the situation. You moved down like me in 2012, right? You read the letter that's sent out that says the water's good. Don't worry about the extra iron in the water. Okay. So as you go along, you find out that no, maybe you have a cancer, any kind of cancer, right? Or you have a leukemia, all right? So you get this letter from this guy and you say, whoa, let's find out. So I challenge you to go out and search, Google, cancer and iron. What you'll find is iron is very good substance for your body. It's like the fertilizer, all right? If you have a kidney problem, you might have anemia, might be anemic. And extra iron, you know, it delivers oxygen to your blood. That's one of the things they are. Well, you go to the American Kidney Society, and what you find out is that, yeah, they actually give them extra iron, people with kidney problems. But then what they find out is most people die from a pathogen, from an infection. And the problem with the extra iron is that feeds the pathogens, that kills them. So you can read that article, you search for it, and you'll find that they say, well, you can do the iron treatment if you don't have an infection problem, which is what most kidney people die. You search for cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, leukemia, you'll find that those cancer cells, their fertilizer is iron. Okay? That's what's in the water. You saw the picture. In case you didn't see it, that's the spigot out in front of my house.
I think Bill from the Cape Gazette wants the picture.
So all I want to do is I see how engineers, and I work for a utility company, one of the largest electric companies in the United States. I understand how you plan projects. All right, but this is a health issue. And when I looked at your privatization, I look at that, I don't see anything that says health issue. I see it, we got to get more flow out to the other end of the town, or we got to do something like that. You need to take into consideration the health issue. Thank you for your time.
So, I'm sorry that we are not coming across as being, at the speed you'd like. I'd ask you, no, and by the, no, don't, you know, and Carrie and Brenda, you've been phenomenal to work with. You've been nothing but professional and, respectful. I'd ask that you wait till tomorrow's discussion. We have a lot of other things we'd like to talk about with you and see how things go. I have extended the offer that if you want to present at the BPW meeting in May, we can do that. The only reason it's not on the April is Austin had a baby, and Austin, as you guys know, is key. And this is his last week off bonding with baby Cade. So,
And we appreciate all that. I think what really blindsided us was we came today with on the agenda the side streets, and we were thinking we were gonna hear that the $4 million project on 4th Street seems to have the ability to request an additional $1 million for other things, would shift that $1 million to get started on the burden side streets. And that's not at all what we're hearing. We're hearing, keep going on 4th, and that'll trickle down to you people on the smaller side streets. And that's not where we want to be. So yes, you and I will talk tomorrow, but we're not gonna get everybody, all the stakeholders in the room at the same time again for a long time. What we really expected to hear today is city council is supportive. They'll help find the extra money that we can't get from state funding. We expected to hear BPW say, we're supportive. We're going to start on this with you. No one should have to drink water that looks like that or bathe their grandchildren in it or let their pets drink it. And we understand that maybe we don't make our scope as big on 4th. We don't go big on 4th. We go with 4th and we use those connectors to start working on the streets that need it. That's what we want to hear. And that's the kind of commitment we're hoping to hear from the joint committee today. Is that right, Meg? So can we get that commitment? Where is the joint body on this?
So,
As was repeated earlier, there's no action, there's no decision, official decisions that can actually be made today, Carrie. These are workshops. There's no action. All these things call for discussion. So there's no ability to do these those were performed at regular meetings. Actions taken at regular meetings.
I appreciate that, but I also appreciate that if I was sitting in your chair and I heard the stories that I heard today, I would be saying, you're right. Let's visit our scope on where we are. That doesn't mean you've committed to it completely, but it tells me you're thinking about it.
That's what
That
we're
you
doing right
heard
now.
Things today that would do that.
That's what we're doing right now. And as you represented, my understanding is in communication with the BPW that he's in discussions with the stakeholders from your community.
Yeah.
That's the communication that we have here to understand. Are you in dialogue with them?
Yes, and so many of them are here today. We've got the surveys that support what we want. We're in dialogue with BPW, but we didn't get what we wanted to hear today. We just aren't feeling that we're getting the promises that this thing's gonna be taken care of. We've been pushed around so long that we're tired of it.
Understood, but I can't personally give you that commitment today because we're not able to take votes today. So I can give you my personal, that I'm following this. I'm in dialogue with Joe and Tom, and I'm keenly aware of the concerns of your residents over there, keenly aware.
yeah, and the bodies are, Andrew and I talk regularly. And talked with Joe. So, we're not doing this in isolation, but water is a BPW. Your issue is with your utility. We are your utility.
Which is why we're meeting with you tomorrow morning at 10:30. But I have to clarify again that when we came today, and then I'll say it one last time, when we came today with the agenda saying, and the side streets, we expected to hear that this was going to be proactive, that we had plans for what those side street projects would look like. And not here, unless I mistakenly heard, that we've got such a big project on 4th Street that we probably don't have the money to get you guys, but don't worry, we'll cut your pipes and we'll see how they look. We just showed that.
And I guess I need to apologize. It wasn't until you brought it up, Brenda, over the weekend when the email. Unfortunately, our two agendas, while they cover the same topics, the wording wasn't the same. So I wasn't even aware that side streets was on the agenda, because if you go and you pull the BPW agenda, it's capital projects. And I had to go back and, look. So we created confusion. Not that that solves your problem, but.
No, it only makes us more afraid.
Well, no, it's editorial, and I don't think that, when the agendas were written, they realized, and I did not look at, my fault, I did not look at the city agenda when it came out to notice the difference, because I thought they were the same. So that's my bad. So if I could ask that we, continue the conversations tomorrow and,
Well,
we
let's
have-
leave it with that. We look forward to the meeting tomorrow, and we're gonna bring in the executive committee or anyone that wants to come from the community. But I want this group to know they'll be back. We've got more pictures and videos and things that we really don't want to share,
As you should be.
but we'll be back if we keep feeling like, we're getting ignored.
as you should be.
That's right.
I'm sorry, was there someone else's hand up?
Amy,
Amy Morosco, on Park Avenue. I have two comments about the capital projects and just questions, Charlie and others. First of all, related to funding, and I'm very well aware of infrastructure funding, but I would say, let's also explore environmental justice funding. It's a separate grant program for specific drinking water problems, wastewater problems in communities of lower income. Separate fund EPA has, hard to get, particularly in a community with such a high MHI. Very difficult, but that doesn't mean you couldn't try. Secondly, on utilities, in terms of burying them, I mean, in my world, it would be so nice, as I know Tom and others would want us to bury utilities. The price is never going to go down, but the price is just exorbitant. Could we look at the capital projects where there are overhead utilities and at least start to move into dark sky lighting? So it wouldn't be 100% bearing all of it, but it would at least move us in the direction of dark sky lighting. So just a
So-
question for comment.
And taking them in the reverse order. Dark sky lighting is the city's lead. We implement whatever specs they have. We maintain the lights. But the city has to, by ordinance or whatever,
Yep.
enforce dark skylights.
Okay.
And I won't share my opinions.
Okay, planning commission is taking it, the environmental subcommittee is taking it on to get it to the planning commission, to get it to the mayor and council. I just worry about projects that are moving on that we could maybe take advantage of it.
I wish you all the best. on
Yeah,
that.
okay.
It's just a matter of timing.
Are there other side streets along Fourth you wanted to
Uh,
talk about, or?
Well, yeah, there's DuPont, Painter, Burton, and Johnson from Burton to Park Avenue. And, you know, total project cost, you know, each one of those streets ranges somewhere from like 1.55 million to almost $2 million, depending on which street you're talking about. So there's 4 of those in addition to Park and 4th Street.
So we're talking in the order of 10 million,
So
plus or
that,
minus. I mean, use a back of the envelope.
so
calculator.
1.75 times 4 is what? Yeah, you're
Yeah.
right, 10 million, another $10 million in addition to the the 11 million we were talking about for 4th and Park. So it's a total project would be in the vicinity of $21 million to do every single one of those streets.
Before, and that my little street's been possible.
Well, I mean, that includes all sidewalk, streets, sewer, storm drain.
Yeah. No, Robin will be there, and I think Robin is on top of it. And, you know, the follow-on meeting, we could certainly consider who should be there. But Robin will be there. Austin will be on our next meeting. And maybe Baby Kate.
I mean, just to be clear, our estimates are based on the most recent data that we have, so.
Right, and that's why I said, I know. Want to reinforce, these are back of the envelope calculations because no engineering's been done.
Absolutely.
Front Street, Old Park, are they just from Fourth in the Burton subdivision?
Thank you.
I'm not quite following you.
There's 2.
Yeah, Piletown Road, Front Street, yes. Park Avenue.
Pictures I showed you, of the Burton subdivision. Well, I can't speak for. While I can't speak for the other part, okay, from the
Yeah.
other side of Fourth.
Yeah,
What I'm interested in is the Burton subdivision where, like I said, I rode around, took pictures after all the hydrant flushing, right? And I didn't see rust laying along Fourth Street. And I have the pictures if you want to see that, but I did see it on all the streets in Burton. Okay, and so what I'm really asking is, in your estimate, are you saying we're gonna run from Front Street, Park, let's say Park, starting at Front Street, which is Ship Carpenters and Park? Is that what the estimate is for $1 million? Or is it just
So-
Fourth Street up Park?
so for Park Avenue, from Front Street to Johnson is, what'd I say, 5.1, 5.24, yes, 5.244.
So you're saying you're coming from front up Park?
Beyond Second, beyond Third.
It doesn't include Front Street.
You're right. There's certain, and that's why I said there are some nuances to what's involved in the estimate, but that's what we decided to put into the Park Avenue estimate. Coupon to park.
We said today we're gonna get coupons to tie into Fourth Street's work. So we're just talking about a scope for Burton. That is, I think the word was coupon, and that's all we want. We don't want to see.
Yeah. I mean, I've got all the numbers. I've got all the numbers for the entire Burton subdivision, all of 4th Street to Burton Avenue and all of Park Avenue from Front Street to Johnson. However we decide we want to split this project up, all the numbers are there.
Charlie, I guess what we're trying to get at, if she's trying to get at is what's the part of the cost from Fourth to Johnston? Forget Ship Carpenter. I mean, yeah, Ship
So
Carpenter.
4th of Johnson.
From
I don't know that I have that
Fourth to
broken out.
five.
I'm sorry.
How much-
I misunderstood you. I'm
How much
sorry.
of that, how much of that 5.2 is
Yeah.
included in the other part?
I don't have that broken out, but I'm guessing it would be about 40% of the cost, roughly, yeah.
It's from Fourth to
To Johnson, yeah.
Huh.
On Park.
yeah.
I mean, I can get that number for you more.
Well,
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yep.
When we get the clarification.
You want to
Does
move
that
on?
finish off the side streets here? You want to go to?
So Ocean View Boulevard, including cul-de-sacs. So this falls into the city's realm. Is that what we're gonna
Yeah,
talk about?
I mean, if it doesn't involve BPW, because I know that this is one that we talked about during our budget. So if it's just mill and overlay, we can skip that one.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
But we do.
Oh, I mean, it's on ours, but it doesn't involve piping. Come on, Stuart.
Well,
Yeah.
I thought there was questions about that. now.
But there is something, if we do want to look at some stuff, if there's going to be
Right.
some sort of work being done out there.
Yeah.
Right, so
We
there.
want to have an
yeah.
opportunity to coordinate to make sure.
okay, yeah.
So yeah, who are you representing today?
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks, Andrew. I'm Stuart Griffin. I'm the HOA president for Pilot Town Village. And we've had some great conversations with the city. We also met back in December with folks at BPW, along with members of council, presented to the city in February. And we're following up today because we saw that section of street work is on the agenda. And you raised a point, Andrew, that I wanted to touch on, which is that we need to get some clarity on the project. I know that it's on the calendar, but there are drainage issues. And in our conversations with Tim and Joe and folks from BPW back in December, we provided all sorts of photographic evidence to say, while we very much appreciate the repaving and milling and repaving, that we think there needs to be a holistic approach to this. And how can we engage, and who, frankly, I don't know who our primary point of contact should be at this point. So I have several questions about, who we should be engaging with, and, what the project, I know that Charlie's provided you all with numbers, but where does it stand? I've got, 219 homeowners as well as a long-term care facility. So lots of people traveling these streets and without sidewalks that walk and photograph and send me pictures of drainage issues. So there are many points here that we need to touch on. So I'm not sure who to address them to, quite frankly. So I'm looking at you, Andrew, because you're at the top of the food chain.
Understanding with the BPW is that we're responsible for the management of the stormwater that's on the surface. So as it relates to crowning the streets to move in a direction of an existing stormwater management drain, that's our goal. If it involves the replacement of said drain or box or pipes underneath, that's when our friends over here step in.
Right. Well,
And when
and I welcome Charlie to speak to it, but I would just say that I think we need both items to be considered, both components. And I think when you go back there and really walk it, you'll see that with, a few decades of settling and things like that, that some of the curbing and some of the drainage boxes are well above the grade of the streets, so we don't get proper drainage. So both parties need to be involved. And how do we actively engage and be a part of that conversation?
May I speak?
Has the drainage piping been evaluated, Robin? I mean, do we know what kind of condition it is? I know there were always problems at the inlet and outlets of some of the
Yeah, and I'm,
things there, but
in
that-
my opinion, that's what it is. There's
Okay,
ponding on the street because there's issues, as Stuart mentions, with grading around catch basins and elsewhere where curb has settled or something, but not the pipe size.
I
We're
see.
not looking
I
at
see.
replacing all the pipe. We just make local revisions to what's there now, which might be something significant if you have to replace a catch basin.
Well, then I guess that
Right.
gets to Stuart's question. So like if we work with GMB as our contract engineer on these projects and you
Yeah.
realize that it's more than just directing the water, that then is the scope of work changes and you go to
So
the,
my estimates include a 15% estimate for concrete improvements. That will cover some of what we've been looking at and talking about, but it does not include, that would not include any catch basin replacement. We would need to look at that.
Yeah.
And I would also add that I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I would also add that we have a stormwater management pond that
Right.
is in our common space. And because we recognize that silting in the pond has been a problem historically, continues to
Yep.
be, it's a very real possibility that we have some connection issues between the drainage boxes and the piping system.
Right.
If there's that much silt in the system, it's coming from somewhere. So again, I think that, and also some of our streets were graded by GMB as I think to a point of failure or to a point of needing more
Yeah.
than just mill and overlay. So again, a very complex conversation, but how do we very actively participate in the conversation? And
yeah.
can I give my constituents some idea of what to expect for a timeline?
Yeah, and I think has been pointed out here, and I went and rode through all the pilot towns, the other day. A lot of the ponding is actually the road subsidence. If you look around and some of it is the drainage boxes. So it's a mix, but I think a majority of it, Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably can correct with the road grading.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And the way it's set up now, I don't even know if you're aware of this, Stuart, is that after we filtered out all the streets that had iron pipes, we filtered out Second Street and there was one other filter. I don't remember exactly what it was. And we ran the analysis. Ocean View Boulevard popped up pretty high on the list. And in fact, we have at least from Pilot Town Road to Canary Drive addressed in the first 3 years of the city's 5-year plan. And that's just mill and overlay with 15% of concrete improvements, not some of these maybe more specific localized drainage issues. And to Stuart's point about silt, I mean, that could happen anywhere. It happened like when we took over Bay Breeze, when the city took over Bay Breeze, those catch basins out there, the mortar between the blocks inside the catch basins had deteriorated away. And just like you're saying, it allowed the underlying sediment to transfer into the catch basin. And then when it rained, it went downstream. That could be happening. I mean, I don't know. There could be some pipes that at their connection points as it leads to the pond, there's some separation, but we wouldn't know that unless we videoed everything. But when I don't think it would be a real problem for GMB to investigate the catch basins from Front Street to Canary Drive and see which ones we feel need to be touched up, addressed, or replaced.
and then to the point about Stuart, just about his residents being aware of the progress. I think, Joe, you and I talked about this, but we've allocated the budget, yeah? So at what point can we expect to the project, to go to bid and those, and then and then keeping them aware of that? And
So I think that's in communication with Ellen, Lorraine, and myself. Those mill and overlay projects just themselves don't take very long to design because the mill and overlay part of it's relatively simple, but we want to go out there and look at the curb and gutter and identify which sections we want to replace. But if there is catch basin work, we would need to get on that pretty quick if we wanted to do the project, in the fall or the spring of next year.
Because we have in fact budgeted in this fiscal year, the current fiscal year, for Ocean View Boulevard.
A section of it.
Yes, that's correct, a
Yeah.
section. So the funds are
And the
there.
cul-de-sacs.
That's correct.
Yeah, so the way that we have it
That's
set up
correct.
now is we
And
would
so-
start from Front Street And there's 3 sections.
From
before
Pilot
you-
Town Road
till-
back.
Till you get in,
Yeah.
and as we move to the end of one section, we would address all the cul-de-sacs inside that
That's
section
correct.
as we do it. Yeah.
That's correct. Right. But when we first had this conversation several months ago with Stuart present and members of his board, at that point in time, we thought that the project was a city only
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
And then more recently, it's been suggested that there are needs that the BPW will need to address at this, as part of this job. We are on a timeline to get this done this fiscal year. And what I would expect would be that BPW would make some kind of commitment to make that happen.
The other question I have, Charlie, is Stuart mentioned an inordinate amount of silt, yeah? And they don't have sidewalks there. So therefore, there's no curbs.
But they have the
They have the rolled
Yeah,
curbs.
they
Is
got
the
curbs.
potential that because there's no sidewalks, that they're getting more silt into that's
I
not
mean,
a result of
unless
that?
and I'm not aware of too many of these, but unless a property's like really doesn't have much grass growth, I don't think that's the problem. I would say it's more what I was talking about before, sediment around the catch basins getting through voids that have been created in the 40 years now that part of the road's been in.
The other thing I'll speak to.
We even have some small sinkholes developing in the
Yeah.
street around the catch basins. So
But
there are obviously
that's an-
some problems.
That's an
There are some
indicator of
problems
it,
there.
yeah.
And I'll even, we can refer back to the conversation we had earlier, the presentation from Jessica Watson with the SCD. That there are tax ditches in this community. And if you walk around that community, and I have the opportunity to walk around it, the tax ditches frequently have water standing in them. And I don't know if they're supposed to hold the water or drain it to the pond in the back of your community, but there's frequently water just standing in those tax ditches. And they look like they could use some attention.
Councilman Risser, to add to that, one of the things that I've noticed, yes, there are tax ditches, but it seems like over the years, the grass and the sediment from yards has filled the ditches. And some people have even filled in the pipes that go underneath their driveways. They're almost non-existent now. But I wanted to point something else out, and that is that when you first enter Ocean View on the left, as you're going toward the nursing home, the first cul-de-sac on your left, there's water constantly draining from the preserve, running down through people's backyards, down through the cul-de-sac, and then coming down and running down the stormwater. It's been running almost all spring. It's probably
That's
still running.
Brownson or Brownston Court, something like that.
So there's a lot of water there in the preserve.
Where's the water coming from? Is it?
It's coming from the
Pump to-
preserve.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
it's-
over Canary Creek.
And kind
Yeah.
of, sheet
Preserve.
flows.
But it's not sump pumps and things like that. It's
No,
it's
it's
runoff.
right out of the.
If it's Brownson Court.
Yeah.
I remember one Saturday I went out there and investigated. There's underground springs of water right there that really cause that area to have water problems.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm a little confused because is the BPW in this or not? I mean, because I don't.
Right now,
Sorry, Tom walked out just now, but
yeah,
but you're saying that you think there should be some.
Well,
and-
It's if the drainage boxes need to be correct.
We can't do that.
I would, Russ, I would just answer you to
Go
say that in the first
Go ahead,
meeting that
Stuart.
we had in December, there, Austin was there. I think Robin may have been there as well, if memory serves. But we did sort of talk about the need to have a collaborative approach because we think that we're talking about both surface conditions and subsurface drainage conditions.
But at this point, we're not involved. Is that correct?
so just to clear it up a little
Yeah,
bit,
go ahead.
when we met in December, until we filtered out all the streets that had iron pipes underneath them, Ocean View Boulevard wasn't on the priority list. Once we filtered those streets out, it rose on the priority list when we ran the analysis. So now would be the time if we want to do something to look at the catch basins.
Well, I mean, I think we should look at the catch basins if if there's a problem there. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, why would we not?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to that
Because
point, so
we
I think,
made
so
the
seriously, we,
commitment.
we put the budget in for a mill and overlay into our budget.
Yeah.
And it's a project that we have for this year. So I would assume that would trigger an engineering study before that we could put out the bid, right?
Yes.
And part of the engineering
Well,
study would determine.
If we knew it was just a mill and overlay, there'd be no study involved, but
Uh-huh.
with the complications that we've been talking about today, we really need to look at those basins.
But you're on a pretty
and-
tight schedule if we're gonna make review of the catch basins and so forth. It's not in the project already. It's
No, it's not. No,
Yeah.
it would be additional cost.
So
yeah.
an additional time.
Yes, but well, yeah, it would be additional time, but I don't know what the problems are yet. So I can't say. I have a feeling that I'll be able to walk from Front Street, Pilottown Road to Canary Court, look at every single one of those catch basins and make a fairly quick determination of what needs to be done, but I can't promise that until I actually look at them.
Tom, as you walked out, I asked a question that I wish you were here. But we were talking about, there's no BPW in the Ocean View project right now, but it sounds like there could be because some of our catch basins might be deteriorating. So
Yeah.
if we're gonna do that, that's gotta be done right away to meet their schedule.
Right.
So
Yeah, I know we had discussed it, or maybe it was at the city council meeting that I heard that discussion.
The
I
budget.
don't recall.
Yeah,
But
but yes, you're right, absolutely. If we don't have it in our budget,
I think it's become, like I said just a couple minutes ago, Tom, it's become more of a priority because Ocean View Boulevard has risen to the level within the city's budget of actually being completed in a 3-year time frame.
Right.
So now is the time to do it because it's been
right.
identified as a priority for the city.
all right.
Right.
Robin, let's take this offline. We can't do anything at Wednesday's meeting. We might have to call a special meeting.
We can coordinate with Robin to give you an idea of what the cost would be.
And if you can get us on your Wednesday agenda, we can get somebody there if that would be helpful.
Thank you, Stuart.
I'm not sure we could. You know,
Locked.
No.
Okay.
I don't think our attorneys would allow that.
Yeah. You can't.
Sorry.
You gotta try.
We could have a special meeting though, that's true.
But you could also just announce it at the
Yeah,
beginning.
but. In terms of following the project, as we said, typically they involve a bid, there would be a bid put out, so that would be a trigger that it's a project that's going forward. Because it's over 20, it's over 50 grand, so we would have
Right.
to put that out for bid, so that would be like an announcement that the city's going forward with it. But I
Right.
think, you know, you've done well to keep in communication, we'll do the same to you, especially if it starts to involve BPW more.
Right. Well, thank you. And honestly, we'd much rather have it done properly than
Right.
quickly.
Totally understood.
So
Ideally both, but my priority would be properly first. So
Yeah.
that being said, if BCW is gonna
Looking like a riverboat pilot.
take your time, I'm in a hurry. That's what we say. Okay, thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Stuart.
So the last one I have is Manila Avenue, and I'll just hit it real quick. It's a complete rebuild, including replacing the 8-inch cast iron water, new water and sewer house services, new stormwater catch basins and piping, and either replacing or relining the 8-inch sewer. Making improvements at the Savannah Road end of Manila Avenue and coordinating with the supermarket and the doctor's offices to make that whole confusing arrangement that exists now better in terms of pedestrian access and bicycle access, et
Considered
cetera.
a roundabout?
Mini roundabout, yes, there you go. Yeah.
Can you make it?
So that project is from King, I'm sorry, Tom.
Kings
From
to Savannah.
King to Savannah.
Yeah, that's
And you have.
1.57 million total, 644,000 for the city, 931,000 for the board.
And what kind of enhancements are you suggesting for this city there?
So that would be crosswalk improvements and making those and curb, because there's no sidewalk. So
Right.
it would be curb and gutter improvements, crosswalk improvements at the ends of the street if as necessary. And then whatever, I put some money in there for whatever we would come up with at the supermarket and the doctor's office to try to make that a little bit more safe.
And is there any opportunity to put a sidewalk in between Kings and Savannah?
There's, I'd have to look at that in terms of what's allowable, what's left in the right of way.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that'd be helpful because if you're establishing a curb line that doesn't exist now, it makes
So the
sense.
curb exists.
Well, not up by Lloyd's, up in that
No,
area.
no, that would,
You know,
all
that's a quite,
that would all be cleaned up. Yeah.
right, right.
Are you gonna,
I don't have concrete sidewalk in the estimate as of right now.
Okay.
that doctor's office doesn't have enough parking now. If we put a sidewalk in there, they're gonna lose about four
Yeah.
spaces.
Yeah, I wasn't
I-
planning on putting sidewalk
No.
there. Yeah. I was just hoping to maybe clean it up a little bit.
I
to
think
make
it'd
it
be
look-
helpful if you could provide an estimate for that sidewalk, the sidewalk piece. It can be separate from all the rest of it, but
So what I would say on that is I'd like
I
to.
mean, just on one side of the
I-
street.
I just would like to wait until we get into the design of it, because what we could possibly do, I don't know this yet, is narrow the street up because
Yep.
it's pretty wide.
Right.
And put the sidewalk in, and maybe the cost would offset itself roughly. So
Exactly.
I don't want to give you a cost estimate now that might be offset in the future. But I can get you one when we get into the design of it.
All right, as long as it's at the right time, we have that information.
Yep.
That
yep.
would be helpful.
And I think that's a project for next year, not this year.
The
Yeah.
whole Manila thing
Mhm.
is, so that, okay. So
Yeah. So just FYI. Yeah.
So FY 26. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. That helps. Okay.
That's all I have.
All right, Charlie.
Okay. Would you rather had my PowerPoint?
No, I appreciate that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Richard. Go ahead.
We still were able to get some images into the presentation.
Ocean
Pardon me?
catch basins.
Yes.
You mentioned you could walk from down to the end and make an estimate of what it would be.
Yep.
How many catch basins are there in that?
You're asking me a question now.
That's-
I want to
Is it-
say there's probably 10, something like
Okay,
that.
so that's the
10,
order of
maybe 12.
magnitude of what BPW might be involved in.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
And that's kind of the worst case.
yeah. What I would not look at, because it would involve getting a sub-consultant to video all the pipe, I wouldn't be doing that.
no,
Yeah, just looking at the catch basins.
because you can tell quite a bit from
Yes,
your experience.
absolutely.
And what you're seeing.
Yeah.
What is the likely
Mhm.
scope of a BPW project?
And I have noticed, like Stuart mentioned, like there's some sinkholes beside catch basins, and that's a definite indicator of what I was talking about, that the sediments transferring in.
Right.
Thank you.
Are all the pipes in there corrugated metal?
I want to say in that section, it probably is. The new section from Canary to the rest of Pilottown Village, beyond Harbor Healthcare, that's concrete pipe. But I'd have to double check on the ones that are in the first section. It was done in 1984.
Well, it's probably something we need to consider, because I hate to repave the streets, although it's a mill and overlay. like,
Yeah, I can check that pretty quick. I'm just drawing a blank right now. I'm sorry.
If it was a full road reconstruction, it would be more imperative. For a mill and overlay is only gonna last. what,
Yeah. I mean, it's
That was 20
possible because
years.
corrugated metal pipe was still in vogue
That's what
back
they
then,
say.
roughly
That's what
about
he's
then.
given us.
That's right before we transferred over to concrete.
Yeah, we should have an idea what kind of condition.
Yeah, we have the plans, so I can look it up.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
All right, thank you.
I mean,
Okay.
we're,
Okay, is anyone from public got comments on anyone online? Okay, so the next thing we have is a continued discussion of future municipal complex, which I don't know that's too much up there. One thing that we did do recently was to send a letter letting them know that we did not intend to keep the building. It was represented to us that would at least not slow things down, if not speed things up, it would at least not slow things down. And I think we had discussions that it wasn't a building that likely could be used, so. I don't know that there's any other updates in terms of the timeline since we sent that letter.
We've not heard anything from the feds on when that turnover will happen.
And, we continue to get requests from multiple folks in the city about using it, but until we get, take over the ownership, we really can't use it in any way, even for parking or putting, vehicles or lay down areas, unfortunately. So that's still likely for the beginning.
Do you have any update on the schedule in general?
We should, the last one was represented us is the beginning of 2025 is when the earliest the handover would take place.
Is that, they're gonna clean it up before you're ready, right?
Yeah, but we would be on the hook as the city for the demo. So we would,
But the cleanup of.
we've agreed to do
hazardous
that.
stuff.
Yeah,
It's on that.
yeah, and they'll do an environmental condition, soil studies, all of that. Yeah.
I'm curious how many people on city council and BPW have actually been in the building?
I have.
Could the rest of us get a tour? I mean, you're taking it for granted that the building can't be used, but maybe it can.
I'm doing based on when it was constructed and
Well,
the engineering standards to then.
That's, built in 1800.
right.
But you don't have to hold public meetings there.
I'm
It's
sorry.
only one floor.
Yeah.
And so you don't have the square footage that we need for the police department, BPW and the city. And the windows, it was built as a military thing, yeah.
So it ought to
But I
be
mean,
pretty secure. I mean, it would be nice to be able to get access. to
Yeah,
see it.
I'm not sure what it
Yeah.
would take because it's still owned by.
Yeah, we could arrange for
Defense.
Yeah.
we can get the Army Corps, get them in there. We have to, maybe Mert Foos could help us with that. We'll work on some dates with them, Barbara, maybe get
Thank
the
you.
corporate body. I don't know if there'd be an issue if it's just a visit for more than. I can't remember how we did it last time. Whether we had quorum issues for people doing site visits through there or not, I'm not sure.
It has to be
Yeah.
less than a quorum, and last time it was myself. Earl, did you go? Khalil went,
I've seen.
I have not.
because actually it was sponsored by Carper.
Harper, yeah.
Yeah, Carper took us in.
Yeah, no, we
Yeah,
should be able to
help.
arrange
And
that.
we can
Barbara.
do a series
Yeah.
of them on the same.
We'll do it
day.
under the guise that we have new members and we want
Right.
them. That's right.
Are you referring to?
Yeah.
That's right. But, yeah, that's where we're on that. And then, I guess the last thing on our topic is C4, which is future workshop, dates and topics. I want to, thank Tim, first of all, for suggesting the conservation district coming. I think we all got a lot of benefit out of that and it sounded like the community did too. So that was a good idea. Are there other ideas that folks have bubbling? And one thing I wouldn't mind discussing next time as it relates to the municipal complexes, maybe start talking about forming a committee and what that committee might look like. So rather than discussing the campus itself, is talking about what a task force might look like and what stakeholders might be good to be involved in that.
Okay. So that would be under a topic,
Yeah.
right? And we can, if we don't have topics this right now, we can offer them between now and the, 2 weeks before the date that we set. Right? Yeah.
So we're talking about
Okay.
in the summer here.
So then, do you have ideas for the date?
So if we look at quarterly, it's July 22nd. It's a Monday.
I'm gonna be out of town.
Look at your calendar, Amy.
So the 29th at press.
Yeah, 29th.
The 29th is good for him. Is that right?
It's good for me.
Is that good for you, Lorraine?
Earl?
29th.
Good for you. Can you fly in?
Is it possible to do it in the morning next time? Because, July, this time of day in July is kind of nice.
Love that.
In the evening, I'd rather, you know what I'm saying? I'd rather do it in the morning and
Yeah.
have this time of day available for,
What?
how about like 1 o'clock then?
Yeah.
The
22nd at 1. Or
The 29th.
29th at 1, does that work for everyone? Okay. Okay, we'll put it on.
You're the
29th at
appointment
1
secretary,
o'clock.
huh?
I'm her appointment secretary. Amy, can you make it?
Why, Carolyn, which I don't understand.
She's,
And we'll meet here in Rollins again, right? Okay,
okay, so we're saying. yeah,
29th at 1. Okay.
All right, let's take some, I just want to open up for public.
Anything?
Anyone? Bill, anything additional? Okay. All right, look, call for an adjournment,
I'll move that we adjourn on the
Okay.
city side.
second.
You have a motion to adjourn?
Second on this side.
Joe,
Second.
you in favor?
All in
Aye.
favor? All right,
Thank you.
thank you all.